So good morning, everyone. I am going to hit record and then we're going to get started. So good morning, everyone, to our commissioners and our guests with us today, and anyone who may be viewing this live or archived video on YouTube. My name is Heather Deering, and I'm the Deputy Chief of Staff to Lieutenant Governor Coleman and staff to the Kentucky Commission on Women. I'm pleased to be here today for our second Kentucky Commission on Women's Conversations with Commissioners series. The Kentucky Commission on Women was established in 1968 by Governor Louis Nunn by executive order, and then became an official state agency in 1970 through legislative action. After a period of dormancy, the commission has been reactivated and has been working quite hard the past several years to establish themselves as a catalyst for improving and elevating the status of women and girls in Kentucky. Our commissioners are an incredibly diverse group of women from all corners of the Commonwealth, and I'm excited to introduce you to a few of them today. So commissioners, I'm going to call on you based on who I can see on the screen. Please unmute yourself, introduce yourself, and let us know what county you represent from the commission. So I'm going to start with Kathleen Wright.
Kathleen Wright, good morning from Jefferson County.
Thank you. Ashley Adkins.
Hi, Ashley Adkins from Round County.
Thank you. Christine Thompson.
Hi, Christine Thompson from Livingston County.
Thank you. Christy Guffey.
Good morning, Christy Guffey from Callaway County.
Marissa All.
Good morning, Marissa All, Fayette County.
Thank you. Whitney Johns.
Whitney Johns from Mercer County.
Thank you. Marita Willis.
Good morning, Marita Willis, Jefferson County.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Are there any commissioners that I missed? Okay, wonderful. So as I mentioned earlier, the commission works to elevate and improve the status of women and girls in the Commonwealth. And last year we launched this series, the Conversations with Commissioners webinar live stream series, a virtual conversation between commissioners and guests about a topic or a theme that the commissioners feel is important to women in the Commonwealth. We will have special guests each time who are knowledgeable or experts in the area to present information and open it up for questions from our commissioners. The theme and the topic of each session will change, and our hosts will change as well as our guests. Before I hand it over to our host of today's conversation, I would like to just note that the views expressed in today's presentation or in any material shared are those of the speakers and not necessarily of the Commission on Women or the administration, although our guests today also represent the administration. So we're really excited to have them here, and I'm really excited to hand it over to our commissioner co-hosts.
Thank you, Heather, and thank you all of the commissioners who have joined us today for this exciting conversation with our special guests from KYSTATS. I'm Marissa All, and I live in Lexington, and I work for the U.S. Department of Agriculture as the regional coordinator for the Appalachia Regional Food Business Center. And I'm going to hand it over to my co-host.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Christy Guffey, and I am from Murray, Kentucky. And so I am a professor here at Murray State University in the Hudson School of Agriculture. Women in Kentucky have made considerable advances over the years, but they continue to face inequities and often prevent them from reaching their full potential. In our work towards elevating the status of women and girls in Kentucky, we came to realize that not only did we need to know who the women of Kentucky are, but so did everyone else. Through the work of the committee that Marissa and I co-chaired, the Status of Kentucky Women Committee, and with the assistance of partners like the Center for Statistics, KYSTATS, the Kentucky Department of Public Health, and other partners, we have prepared a snapshot of Kentucky's women and girls in the Commonwealth. I am thrilled to announce that last month, during Women's History Month, the Commission published this data in its first report, we think in 10 years, called Women in Kentucky. It includes data in the areas of population, electoral representation, educational attainment, workforce participation, and health. And it can be accessed on the Commission's website, women.ky.gov/stats.
This publication would not have been made possible without the partnership of several other entities, but the partner we relied on the most was our special guest today, KYSTATS. The Kentucky Center for Statistics, KYSTATS, collects and links data to evaluate education and workforce efforts in the Commonwealth. This includes developing reports, responding to research requests, and providing statistical data about these efforts so policymakers, practitioners, and the general public can make better informed decisions. KYSTATS assisted us in identifying a wide variety of data about women in Kentucky, more even than we were able to include in our first report, including population, demographics, age, employment and earnings, educational attainment, and economic well-being. And today, we are excited to have with us Dr. Matt Berry, the Executive Director of KYSTATS, and Barrett Ross, Lead Research Analyst from Kentucky Stats, to help add some context to specifically the educational and workforce data that we included in our Women in Kentucky report. With that, I will hand it over to Dr. Berry and Mr. Ross to introduce themselves and dig a little deeper into the data.
Well, thank you so much for that warm introduction, and thank you for having us. This is a real pleasure for us to be here. As the co-chair so kindly said, I'm Matt Berry. I'm the Executive Director at the Kentucky Center for Statistics. With me is my friend and colleague, Barrett Ross, who I couldn't remember his title actually because he's just sort of all things KYSTATS. So thank you so much for saying his title. But if you've ever worked with us, I'm sure you've worked with Barrett. And so he's here because he was a big catalyst for putting these data together and hopefully helping everyone who was working with them understand them. So I do have a PowerPoint presentation. This is the risk you run when you invite the data guys to come, is that we do have PowerPoint to show you. But let me get this up very quickly here. And I have to put a couple more buttons. Okay. Can you all see that screen there? Okay, great. Thank you. All right. So again, thank you for having us. Again, we're here representing KYSTATS. That was such a wonderful introduction that I don't really need to hammer home these couple of slides, but I did just want to know, because I don't ever like to assume that folks know exactly what KYSTATS is and what we do. We are the office that houses the state, longitudinal data system and labor market information office for the Commonwealth. Don't get scared off by this slide. It is not intended so that you can read it. This is a bit of this is where we really nerd out over how much data we have. So this is just to show an example and a representation of the types of data sources that go into the Kentucky longitudinal data system. So if I've already lost you at the Kentucky longitudinal data system, really what it means is we collect and connect data from across sectors. So you can see higher education and K-12, early childhood, workforce, and a lot of areas and agencies in between. So we connect across sectors and we look at data over time, and that is all done to inform policymakers, practitioners, and the public. And so that's our mission. And this is kind of what it looks like. And I have to say, and this does not reflect on me because I have been here a relatively short amount of time, particularly compared to the life of KYSTATS. We're very fortunate in Kentucky. We have what I think is the best and most robust longitudinal data system in the country. So that's a little bit of a commercial for us so that you all, I hope, continue to use our resources for the really important and critical work and conversations that you all are having. This is just a real snapshot of kind of what we're focused on now as an organization and an agency. Our research agenda acts as our strategic agenda. So if you're a data and research organization, hopefully that makes sense. This is really just to show you that the work that you all are doing is right in line with a bunch of our priorities. I could actually fit what you all are focused on under any of these four categories. And so again, really just to reiterate, this is super important to the Commonwealth, but also really important to us. And so thank you for having us at the table. And we hope to remain there so that we can take a look at data that are helpful to your conversations. So as our co-chairs mentioned, we have been engaged with you all over some months to pull some data from several sources. So what I wanted to do today was, before we get into some of the Q&A, excuse me, I know I'm probably not the only one struggling with spring allergies right now, but I'm just going to apologize up front. So we have pulled together some data, which I provide. I think one of the co-chairs used the term snapshot. I think that's completely the right term to use. This is a snapshot of data relative to particularly women in Kentucky. And so we looked really what I'm going to show is kind of 4 primary snapshot areas that I think give a good overview. And then what we thought would be really interesting is to also take a second to look at some of the work that we have also done already in the state at KYSTATS, so that you all can have a sense for what other data already exist, what other analyses have already occurred, to give some more information, and then again, hopefully to prompt further conversations so that we can continue to dig in as you all continue to advance. Hopefully we can do that right alongside you. So I'll get started into the data. I always like to give the caveat that if I start to move too quick or slip into research and data, mode, and it doesn't make any sense, please just raise your hand and yell at me, and I'll put it into better terms. But we're starting here with educational attainment. So throughout these slides, what we've tried to do is make it very simple to digest, right? So we're color coding male in the light color, female in the darker color here for all of these 4 areas. We're going to start with educational attainment. Educational attainment, for those who may not be steeped in the field, really broadly refers to individuals who have a post-secondary credential of some kind, right? That's the broader term. So that could be as a short-term certificate all the way up to a doctorate. Educational attainment tends to be analyzed quite a bit. Dr. Thompson, the president at CPE, can eloquently speak for hours and days and weeks and months about why it really matters and why the Commonwealth has set such clear attainment goals. But for our purposes, we look at educational attainment in a lot of our different reporting for a lot of different reasons and in a lot of different areas. These data right here, I just want to note really quickly without going way down into the weeds. These have been pulled from the U.S. Census Bureau American Community Survey. So I just want to note that, because a lot of what I talked about is our state's longitudinal data system. So these come from a national data source. So there's nothing wrong with that. I just wanted to note it so that's really, really clear. What we're looking at here are the percentage of people in our state, both male and female, 25 and older. So we look at 25 and older because that typically is how folks conceptualize the beginning of prime working age. And so 25 plus with a bachelor's degree or higher. So that could be bachelor's, master's, or doctorate of some kind. And there are some others, you could have a postmaster's certificate, et cetera, but above a bachelor's degree. So a couple of things I think to note here, over time, so we looked over time, 2012 to 2022, which are the most recent data. I think 2 things of note. One, you can see growth, over that time for both male and female Kentuckians. And then I think relatively consistently over time, you can see a larger percentage of women in Kentucky have educational attainment at this level than do men. And so really it peaks in the last couple of years around that 29% for women and around 25 or 26% for men. Now these would look different if we looked at attainment at a different level. So if we looked at associate degree and higher, those would look a little different in terms of percentages. But for the bachelor's degree, this is what it's looked like over the last 10 or so years. A related metric, but obviously different, again, pulled from the Census Bureau, are wages. So I think one thing to note right up front here that is of interest or of note is now the sort of the dynamic flips, meaning consistently it's the same in that for both groups, men and women, over this 10-year period, you can see pretty consistent growth. But it has flipped in that for education attainment at bachelor's degree and above, women had a higher percentage. The median earnings for full-time year-round workers for women are lower consistently over this 10-year period as compared to men. And so if you look at the numbers, the raw numbers, so I also should note these are for 16 and over folks earning wages year-round. So if you look at the raw numbers or raw median earnings, men have had a slightly larger gain over time as a percentage. So women, the exact opposite is true. Women have had a slightly larger percentage gain over that time, so about 30% as opposed to 25% for men. But the median earnings, the raw median earnings, remain larger for men across that whole time period. The Other of the last two metrics that we wanted to look at was workforce participation rate. So again, this comes from the census. And I should note too, I'm sure that there's no wondering why this is happening, but you'll see a gap in the data here in 2020. I think we can all remember why that probably occurred in terms of data collection, but I did just want to note it. That wasn't a mistake. There's just no data for that year. So workforce participation rate, excuse me. So this is, well, technically in the community survey, American Community Survey from the census, it's labor force participation rate. And so that refers to folks who are working or searching for work. And what we've looked at here is 20 to 64-year-olds. And this is in the state again. The percentage different than educational attainment, now similar to wages. The labor force participation rate for women is pretty consistently lower than men over this time period. And this is one where just the numbers themselves stay pretty consistent over that 10-year period. Not a huge amount of growth or drop or anything like that, but the difference between the two groups remains pretty similar. We also did take a look at what this would how this would compare, to the nation as a whole. And so in Kentucky, our labor force participation rate for women is about that 70% mark, and for the U.S. it's about 74%, so a little lower than the national average. So these are the kind of things where we could take a look at particular states or sort of a regional approach, but because the nation, obviously that's a big comparison, but it is a little bit lower. And then finally, excuse me, we looked at kindergarten readiness rates, so sort of the other end of the cradle to career spectrum, if you think about it in that way, which we often do. So looking at female and male boys, or female and male kindergarten students. And so this is just, again, in case you're not super familiar with what kindergarten readiness really refers to. These are the scores on the Brigance entry exam. And when you're looking at the dip here, the drop that you can see in 2022, that is being reported from those kiddos would have taken the Brigance the fall prior. So that would have been a fall 2021 test that they took, and then it's reported that following year. So that's why that drop looks maybe, I'm only saying that because I don't want folks to see that and wonder why there was such a lag post-recession for that drop. So that's why it's because of the lag in the data that you're seeing that drop maybe a little bit later than you might have anticipated. So, we don't comment on the effect of the pandemic or anything of that nature. That's not our role at KYSTATS, but I did just want to mention that from the data perspective, that lag is kind of expected. But again, now you can see the sort of the dynamic has flipped if you're comparing our two groups, right? And so female kindergarten readiness is higher across this entire timeline as compared to male. And again, just like education attainment, this is something that's looked at for lots of different reasons, right? We know that this correlates to third grade scores, which then sort of correlate to academic, at least performance, all the way through K-12, and then on down the road. And so that's not to say that kindergarten readiness scores are destiny. Certainly not. I have my youngest is in kindergarten, and so she did not do great on her Brigance. I'll just say that. She's not here. She can't hear me. She did not do great on her Brigance. So I mean, she's a brilliant little kiddo. So I'm not saying that this is destiny, but it is an important metric for us to understand sort of the trajectory of students down the road. So that's kind of the snapshot portion. That's the big picture, where we are in Kentucky. I did just want to take a couple of minutes. To kind of say what else we can do. And so we here being obviously KYSTATS, but I think, hopefully we as the larger collective, we have tons and tons and tons of reports that exist already. And they really do run the gamut from what we just looked at, early childhood, K-12, post-secondary workforce, and a lot throughout. We have a very intentional approach, and that's why I highlighted our research agenda themes and priorities. We have a very intentional approach to understand, how different groups of Kentuckians are experiencing these systems, how they're moving through the educational system, or what it looks like for them in our workforce. And so we look at data anytime we can. We disaggregate our data, by race and ethnicity, by sex or gender, and any way by geography, any way that we can get a better understanding of kind of what's happening. And so I say all of that to say, I think we have a lot of existing information already that can even take a deeper dive into some of these questions, kind of beyond the snapshot, which is really important. So that's not, we need these kind of snapshot approaches. But just a couple of quick examples before we move into Q&A that I think are really interesting, that are specific to this conversation, I think. So we have a teacher equity report. Obviously, there's a lot of conversation happening around our teacher workforce. We've been producing this and some other teacher reports for years. There are a couple of things happening on this slide. It's a little busier than the others, I know, but along the left side, that's really a kind of a longitudinal look at the pipeline from 2015 high school graduates, college enrollment, and then really how many of those individuals from our state end up enrolled in as a teacher or in public K-12 in these teacher prep programs, excuse me. And so you can see how that sort of decreases over time, which is what you would expect, but you can kind of see that pipeline. On the right side, in the main part of this slide, is a look at the gender demographics of that pipeline. And so if you start high school graduates at the very top, you would expect that's about a 50-50 split. If you go all the way almost down to the bottom now, ever employed in public K-12, and you look at female versus male, now you've got an 81 to 19% split. And so it's just, I think this is a really interesting look at how that funnel starts to, if you think of that as a funnel, how those differences start to occur throughout that funnel. We also have work that we have worked with CPE, I should say, on, countless reports. They're a board member of ours, or one of our closest partners. They have recently produced some work that is looking at. So this is a CPE. These are data based on a CPE report. But what I think we're suggesting is that this is an example of something we could dig into to learn more about how these dynamics are playing out in other sectors. This is a look at undergraduates who are parents in Kentucky by gender. And so really, I think that what you can see is a couple of things, jump out to me. One, the numbers go down over time. Two, the percentage of male parents that are undergraduate students as the total goes down. And so now, if you look at the 2022 to 2023 school year or academic year, 75% of parenting undergraduates are female. So, I think they have highlighted that recently in some of their social media and outreach. And so, I think one of the things we have become interested very recently, and one of the reasons I'm mentioning this is, we would like to look at what happens to those individuals who are parents as undergraduates as they enter the workforce. And so that's something where the longitudinal data system can now take this and really, I think, provide a little bit more information. So just another example. And then this is one of my favorite things and this is just two more quickly, but I think this is one of my favorite things we've done recently. Dr. Beth Kelly, our research director, did this work on her own. I don't know how. She has no time. I have no clue how she did this, but she did it because she's a superhero. So this really looks at wage growth over time. So what we did is we looked at first time. Really, the question was, what do first-time mothers, what do their wages look like over time as compared to other groups? And so there's really four groups. We looked from 2013 to 2019. We looked at all of these individuals working, first-time fathers, non-fathers, non-mothers, and mothers. So really four groups. And so here, I think the highlight here is what we pulled out. From 2013 to 19, working first-time fathers' wages increased by 80%. As compared to 40% increase for first-time mothers. And we created these really similar comparison groups because we wanted to look at these groups as close to apples as we could, and really, to the best of our ability, look at the effect of being in one of those groups or another. And so I think this is on our website. It's in the blog. It's really fascinating stuff. And Heather, I see you nodding because I know you were at our summit where we presented this for the first time, but it's a body of work that I think we're going to continue to expand, and is really brilliant stuff. And if you all have a need for a speaker, Dr. Kelly can come and tell you more about it. It's really interesting stuff. And
Noted.
This is the last, I'm sorry.
Noted.
Okay, good.
Her
And this is
presentation was amazing.
She's really brilliant and passionate about that subject. And so this is my last slide, and then I'll stop. And I know hopefully we have an opportunity for Q&A. This is basically a childcare desert map. And so the takeaway really from this, and there are lots of data caveats, and we could have, a whole hour thing about this, but up to about 11% of our total population in the state live outside of a 15-minute drive window to their nearest childcare facility, right? So I think one of the reasons we looked at this, it was for other work, but we looked at this because I think, as we all know, that can have a relationship to all of the other areas that we just discussed: post-secondary education, workforce, et cetera. And so that's just kind of again, a snapshot of where we are today in the state, an overview of what I think some of the interesting work we've already done at KYSTATS is, and some ideas around what else we might be able to do. Hopefully you all have some questions for us. I'm going to stop sharing. I could pull this back up if you all need to have a specific data question, but again, thank you for the opportunity. We really, really do appreciate being here.
Christy or Marissa, do you guys have a question you want to kick off?
Yes, thank you guys so much for this. I think it's a wonderful opportunity for us to be able just to learn from you and know what else is going on and what all KYSTATS does. But with the help of KYSTATS, we actually have gathered more educational attainment and workforce participation data than we were able to include in our snapshot. Is there any data or information about women in Kentucky that KYSTATS is tracking that is not included in our publication that you feel might be important for us to know?
I think you can probably tell by how much I highlighted it, how much I talked about it. I do think that the Working Mothers blog is a good example. And that's pretty specific, but I think it's a good example of the type of work that we're engaged in. We're really doing some work around income mobility in general. And while we're looking at that, we're very interested in how mobility over time, or wage mobility really, but how mobility over time might differ between different groups. And so that's not, we're looking at, again, race and ethnicity, but we're also looking at women and men, and we're very interested in that kind of stuff. But I do think, again, that's why I really wanted to kind of hone in on that one. That's, I think, a really important piece. And it's kind of just, we have published that in a blog format. So it's, it's pretty short and condensed, which we've done on purpose. But I think there's so much more that we want to do with that. So I think that's really something that, I would say as we continue down that road, I will commit that we'll make you all aware of that, and Heather will keep you informed, so that if it's something that can inform the work of your group, we'll absolutely make you aware of that.
Wonderful. And I think there was another question from one of our commissioners. And it says, is there data that shows why women aren't participating in the workforce, such as childcare and transportation? And I know Barrett kind of commented on that in the chat, and I'll let you kind of talk about the survey possibly that could maybe help answer that question for us.
Yeah, Barrett, if you put something in the chat that you want to chime in with, I'll let you go ahead and start, and then I'll give my general caveat, my KYSTATS caveat. Go ahead, Barrett.
Sure. And thanks for asking. Yeah, I don't have a whole lot of context for that pulse survey. I'm aware of it, and I can pull some of that data together, but I believe that is one of the questions they ask. If you are not participating in the workforce, why? What is the reason for that? And the American Community Survey has a data set that kind of delves into that a little bit as well. So I think we can get some data pulled together for you to answer that question.
And my KYSTATS caveat that I am legally bound to say is, we operate as a nonpartisan agency, and so we provide data. We always say we provide results and not conclusions, and so we really do our best to not comment on our thoughts on why something might be happening. Now, if there are data sources we're aware of that, like Barrett just mentioned, we're happy to help provide that, and we're obviously also, not that you all need us to help facilitate, but we could also help facilitate conversations with content experts as well. But the why we leave for other folks.
Thank you all.
Well, I know that we wish we had more time today because this has been wonderful. And we want to thank you both, Dr. Berry, Mr. Ross. Thank you for your time and expertise today. We also appreciate your assistance in our publication and the continued support that you all have provided. I'm going to pass this back to Heather to close out today's session.
Thank you, Marissa. Thank you, Dr. Berry and Mr. Ross. We really appreciate you all being here. I know you're mad that I called you Dr. Berry, but you're just going to have to live with it that one last time. I've been moved by this data. The more we talk about it, the more kind of fired up I get about it. And I had forgotten the slide that Dr. Kelly had presented. I'm glad you shared it today again so that the commissioners could see it. I think we're excited to take our data document and act on it now, right? So we hope to publish it every year so we can keep tracking this data over time to see what moves and what doesn't move. So really appreciate you all being here this morning and being part of this conversation. And commissioners, thank you also for joining us this morning. We will archive a recording of this conversation on our YouTube page for future viewing and reference. And before we close out, I just want to thank the commissioners who joined us and remind everyone that our next conversations with commissioners will be in June. We are still confirming our topic and our guests, but we will share that information on social media once we get that confirmed. And for anyone who's watching who's interested in following the work of the commission, you can sign up to stay in touch with us through our website, women.ky.gov, or you can follow us on Instagram and Facebook. So thank you again for having us this morning or joining us this morning, and we look forward to future conversations.